right. So, I think we are about ready to start. We have the full room. We have our special guests, our stars of today here at the stage with us. So, ladies and gentlemen, door is closed. Let me open this session, the afternoon public session for the Secretary General of NATO, and let me welcome on my behalf and behalf of Slovak Atlantic Commission and all people in the room, all people on WTC streaming, all people on our Facebook and our webpage on live stream, so supposedly much more people than in the room. Welcome, first of all, you, dear Secretary General, here in Bratislava, and let me welcome also Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mikuláš Dzurinda. This is not first trip of yours to Bratislava, so this is not a new place for you. We were very fortunate to have you at our conference about 1.5 years ago. You were freshly in your function and you gave very interesting speech, which was very much echoed here from Bratislava, outlining your new vision. It's 1.5 years, it's somewhere in the middle, so it's good time to come again. And not only talk to all of our leaders, and I know that you met all of our constitutional nobility in the country, but also to enlighten a little bit our public. So without any further ado, let me ask Minister to introduce you, and I'm very fortunate that we have Minister of Foreign Affairs who is now introducing you. You got lots of together. You were both leaders as the Prime Ministers. You were both leading substantial and bold reforms in our countries. Mikuláš Dzurinda was 8 years leader who was kicking off a Slovak Tiger success story, and now you are in new functions following in trying to kick off a new revitalized dimension of NATO. Mr. Minister, can I kindly ask you to introduce Secretary General, and then I'll ask you, Mr. Secretary General, to deliver your remarks. Thank you very much.
Yes, Rasto, I will do it with a special pleasure. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor and pleasure to welcome an honorable guest, a friend of Slovakia, a friend of democracy, a very experienced politician, very good runner and skier, I must tell, and my good friend, and a colleague in the past, Mr. Anders Fogh Rasmussen, for now in capacity of Secretary General of NATO. So, dear Anders, welcome. We are very happy to have you here in Bratislava. Secretary General's visit in each member country is a welcome opportunity for discussion on the current agenda in NATO. I believe that frank and open dialogue with you, leaders of the 21st century, is of utmost importance to us, to our common future. Without any exaggeration, NATO, being the main pillar of our transatlantic security, plays a crucial role also in a wider area. NATO today is completely different from the NATO founded in 1949, and also from, I would say, the new NATO of the 1990s. It is more complex, more political, and more important. The importance of NATO has not decreased. On the contrary, in times of crisis, uncertainty, and security risks, it is NATO to be able, capable, and the first one to react when necessary. The alliance and we as the member states face many challenges. The fresh one, Libya, then the Afghan mission, the internal reforms of NATO, and many, many other issues, all in all, addressed in the new strategic concept adopted at the summit in Lisbon last year. It is a very ambitious document, loaded with high expectations, but definitely not unrealistic. I do hope that Secretary General's address will bring fresh ideas and inputs in answering the ever-emerging questions. For instance, what is the role and relevance of today's NATO? To what extent have the basic values and principles of NATO changed? Or simply, do we Europeans still need NATO? Having said that, let me pass the floor to our distinguished guest, Secretary General, dear Anders, please.
Minister Turenda, Ambassador Kacha, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Mikolas, first of all, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And I can confirm that we have done running together, both here and in Denmark. We have done skiing together here. Denmark is too flat. And we both like challenges, both uphill and downhill, like in politics. I have enjoyed many years of cooperation and friendship with you, and it's a great pleasure to continue that cooperation in our new capacities. And we have actually had a very, very fruitful meeting today, like my meetings with other representatives of the government and the President. And it is indeed a great privilege to speak here today in this historical building. And I'm aware that my remarks are being transmitted beyond this hall to audiences elsewhere. So to all of you, good afternoon. It has almost become a cliche to say that we live in times of change. But that does not mean the statement is any less true. And in times of change, it is important to have an anchor of certainty, something dependable, something reliable, something strong. For over 60 years, NATO has been such an anchor. The Atlantic Alliance has allowed North America and Europe to deal successfully with the tremendous changes we have seen in our security environment. For the first 40 years of its existence, NATO used defense, deterrence, and determination to prevent the Cold War from getting hot. Thereafter, NATO played a major role in reuniting Europe and making it whole, free, and at peace. Through its partnership policy, NATO provided invaluable assistance to many countries as they rediscovered their own independence and sovereignty. This included assistance to countries in this region. And through its open door policy, NATO provided a home. NATO is where those countries feel secure. They know that they are surrounded by friends who would rush to defend their sovereignty if ever it were threatened. NATO has played a key role in bringing peace to the Balkans following the implosion of the former Yugoslavia and the wars that ensued. And since the start of this new century, NATO has continued to be the unique forum where Europe and North America develop new common approaches to new common challenges, such as terrorism, proliferation, and cyber warfare. These achievements have not come for free. They have required hard work and commitment. And especially in these last few years, they have also been costly in terms of human life. In these times of economic difficulty, many NATO countries are struggling to cope with a fundamental question: how to afford the level of security needed to defend our values and to preserve peace in the face of today's security challenges. And I want to use my remarks today to provide an answer to that question. And I would like to do that by making 3 points. I shall look at how the global economy needs security to flourish. I shall highlight how some new security threats can be cheap to create, yet can have significant economic impact. And I shall then explain how we can afford the security we need to protect our prosperity by working together more closely within NATO. And let me take those points in turn. First, the interdependency of economic well-being and security. Many of you in the audience here are studying economics. I remember clearly my own days as an economics student. And one of the observations that struck me most was by the French economist and politician, Frédéric Bastiat. In the early 19th century, he stated that if goods don't cross borders, then armies will. And that statement is as true today as it was then. Trade encourages the creation of wealth through economic growth as opposed to conquest and conflict. And this becomes a virtuous cycle. Increased economic activity creates greater security, and this in turn leads to further prosperity. But there has been a dramatic change in the economic and security dynamics within which we operate. Globalization has fundamentally altered all of our lives. The impact of the internet, increased global travel, and the free flow of people, money, goods, ideas, and information have all led to a remarkable degree of interdependence between our economies and our societies. Globalization has dramatically increased our prosperity, but at the same time, it has also dramatically increased our vulnerability. Instability in one nation can create instability across a whole region. And any disruption to transport, communication, and information systems comes at great cost to nations and the global economy. In order to maintain the free movements on which our globalized economy depends, we need to invest wisely in our security. And this leads me to my second point, which is the paradox of the new economics of security. To provide adequate defense against the wide range of threats and challenges we face, we need to invest in the full range of capabilities. Many of these capabilities are complex, high-tech, and high-cost. Yet, some of the threats we face can be developed at relatively low cost, and the damage they can inflict upon us is totally disproportionate. Take, for example, the terrorist attacks on 9/11. For the cost of training several pilots, terrorists were able to hijack 4 airlines and caused the tragic death of nearly 3,000 innocent people. The United States Congressional Research Service estimated the cost to the global economy to be $300 billion worth of lower world growth in 2001 and 2002. Or take the example of the cyber attack against Estonia in the spring 2007. A distributed denial of service attack brought one of the world's most wired countries to its knees. Thankfully, the air traffic systems, hospitals, and other critical systems that could have resulted in the loss of life were not targeted, but the attack did disable the websites of the Prime Minister's office, Parliament, government ministries, political parties, newspapers, and several banks. With hijacked computers, bots they're called, being available on the internet for less than 4 euro cents each. The cost of creating botnet attacks is relatively cheap. Yet the cost of the attack to just one of the Estonian banks has been estimated at over 10 million euros. And the effect on Estonia's sense of security was also severe. And it's a similar picture with piracy. Using a relatively cheap speedboat, some AK-47s, and rocket-propelled grenades, pirates have been able to severely disrupt some of our major shipping lanes. They have taken people and cargoes hostage. Their actions have resulted in higher insurance premiums, in higher costs for hiring crews, and in higher costs for implementing security measures. The worldwide cost of piracy last year has been assessed to be a staggering $8.3 billion. $8.3 billion. So, what lessons can we draw from all these facts? For me, the key lesson is that we need to continue to invest adequately in our defense capabilities. Because if we don't, we will no longer be able to defend our common values. And we will no longer be able to provide the security and stability that is necessary for our economies to function and to flourish. But how can we do this when all our countries are facing budgetary pressures? And this is the third point I wish to make. In 17 allied countries, including some here in this region, defense budgets are falling, both in real terms and as a percent of a gross domestic product. If we acknowledge that there's no more money available, and there isn't, at least for the foreseeable future, then we need to find new ways to build security that cost less money. And I see three ways for doing this. First, we must be bold. We must intervene early to prevent crises from developing and spiraling out of control. The old saying that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure remains valid. Second, we must focus on supporting local capacities and local ownership. We are already following this logic with our training missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, as well as with the support we are providing to the African Union. By training the local forces, we not only help the countries to help themselves, but we also help to reduce the security burden we have to bear. And third, smart defense. Our Libya mission has reinforced the need for the alliance to have available the full range of military capabilities, including those at the technological edge. Certain aspects of this operation simply couldn't have been conducted without some of the highly advanced military capabilities of the United States. Drones, surveillance equipment, and precision weapons. And many nations are unable to provide individually some of this type of high-tech equipment. But we don't actually need each and every ally to have the full range of equipment. What we do need is to have the right equipment available within NATO. We need every ally to play its part, and we need to bring it all together with strong integrated command and control capabilities. And smart defense will help us to achieve this. Smart defense is about nations building greater security, not with more resources, but with more coordination and more coherence. This can encourage nations to change their approach from a purely national one to one that favors multinational solutions. And actually, Slovakia has already set a very good example by participating in the multinational logistics coordination center in Prague. You bring a valuable contribution to the development of multinational logistic capabilities for operations. And I encourage you to continue on this path. My priority is for NATO to help European nations to acquire and maintain together the capabilities and skills that they can't afford to do alone. And I believe such multinational cooperation can yield its greatest benefits when done on a regional basis, where common geography and history can help different views to converge. All this would help the alliance to have the right capabilities, to keep up with the fast pace of technological change, and to share the burden of developing new capabilities for NATO. With the collective security guarantee of the alliance, and by using the opportunities offered by smart defense, NATO can help you to meet your security obligations and commitments at a price taxpayers can afford. Ladies and gentlemen, for over 60 years, NATO has successfully defended our common values. It has protected our common interests, and it has provided the forum where we have developed common approaches to common challenges. Today, we face a wide range of security challenges, but we also face a dilemma. We have to build adequate security at a time of economic difficulty. I believe that by acting early, by helping local forces, and by pursuing smart defense, we can help to resolve that dilemma. And we can prevent the economic crisis from turning into a security crisis. I'm confident that with your help and your support, we will be successful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen, both Secretary General and Mr. Minister, for your introductions. Let me open the floor for discussion. We have about 1.5 hours for exchange here on the floor. To kick off the debate, I have 2 questions, one for each of you. Let me start with a question for you, Secretary General. I was inspired when I look at the webpage, the NATO webpage, and you've done a great job here, by the way. I think it improved dramatically in the last couple of months, the way how you communicate with people, because this is an extremely important element. I found a very interesting message of yours from May, which was titled, labeled, "The Commitment, Capability and Connectivity." I find in those 3 words actually all the substance of all relationships and all the substance of what we do and how we function. If we do not have commitment, then everything is wasted. If we cannot support our commitment by capabilities, then what is the credibility of the commitment? If we do not have connectivity to communicate, then what waste we do? The commitment in particular and capability goes hand in hand with will and ability, being willing and able. And this was at the substance of NATO always. NATO is a relationship issue about being willing and able to commit your nation to help others in the times of need. This is a success story of 60 years. We are behind Lisbon Summit. You led the alliance, you chaired through shaky waters to have a new strategy. Strategy is bold. Minister said, not, let me repeat precisely, not unrealistic. This is a good expression, not unrealistic. Though, you know, I remember a couple of years ago when I was at some of NATO drafting sessions, that's a nightmare experience. For those who haven't been through, that's a horrible experience. All night until the morning, the most stupid comments. To come to the consensus, horrible thing. You come to consensus quite smoothly. So where we are, what that means, do we mean that? Where is the will? You've been to the United States, you travel around the alliance, you speak to leaders, you chair the group of leaders. How do you feel the commitment? Where is the will? Do we mean what we say? Are we going to deliver on something, what we promise, or are we heading up for an empty, open end?
Works. Yeah, quite a question. The essence of it, the essence of the question is: do we have the will? I would answer in 2 parts. First, yes, there is a strong will to pursue what has always been the core function of our alliance, territorial defense of our populations and our member states. That was reaffirmed at the summit in Lisbon, and I see that as also a reaffirmation of the strong will to maintain what is the core function of our alliance. So that's the first part of my answer. However, there is a second part of this will, and that is the will to invest in that. And that's quite another thing. I have to say quite bluntly that it is a matter of concern that we see an increasing gap between the United States and Europe when it comes to defense investment and the will to invest in the necessary capabilities. 10 years ago, the US defense expenditure represented around a half of all defense expenditure within our alliance. Today, it's 75%. That increasing gap raises a lot of questions. Firstly, what about the interoperability, our ability to cooperate? If the American technology is at this level, while the Europeans are lagging behind here, then it will be increasingly difficult to cooperate. Even if we had the will, it will in the real world be increasingly difficult. Next, the political dimension. American taxpayers may ask the question, I think legitimately so, why is it that we have to invest heavily, 4% of GDP, in security to maintain open sea lanes, to ensure that the world economy can flourish? Why are we to invest heavily in that security while others profit from it? Is it a fair burden sharing that others can just be free riders? So that's a political dimension. And I think in the long-term perspective, that should be a matter of concern for all Europeans. And finally, it's also about Europe's role in the world. If the Europeans lack necessary capabilities to conduct operations beyond Europe's borders, then Europe, the role of Europe will gradually fade away on the global scene. If we can't contribute to crisis management beyond our own borders, then you can speak about the European Union, strengthened European profile, I don't know what, but it will have no impact on the global scene. So for all these reasons, I would urge the Europeans to find ways to invest sufficiently in their own security.
I very much agree. I'll keep this ugly thing on my face, and I'll leave this smart weapon to you. I definitely agree that marginalization by choice wouldn't be the smart choice for Europe. I'm very much in line with what you say, Mr. Secretary General. Mr. Minister, for you I have another question, and it was mentioned, both of you touched that area, because it's coming to smart defense and coming to produce to capabilities. Seems like we are not able to squeeze much more of the budget. Thanks to the crisis, or due to the crisis, not thanks to, more due to the crisis, but also due to other political reasons of evolution, we seems to be sentenced to work with budgets we have. For that reason, build muscles, stream fat. In Slovak case, it seems like we've consumed all fat already, and muscles are being atrophied, and even bones sometimes going, being very thin. So one of the ways, and it was mentioned by both of you, would be being smart, pooling, sharing, and do more in cooperation. We are behind Visegrad presidency here, and even when I was State Secretary in your government almost 10 years ago, we tried a number of regional initiatives here on defense. They never led to any major success, though we tried hard. But time, it's pushing us, and everything is set in the way that slowly we will have no choice. Mr. Minister, my question is, where do you see that we are wrong, where we do mistakes, and where we can improve on producing more in the region and more in our local cooperation with our neighbors?
Well, the situation 10 years ago was completely different. I'm sure that you remember that 10 years ago we were able to dedicate at most 2% of GDP for defense.
Yep. For the
And
last
now
time. Yep.
we live time of economic crisis, so these circumstances have been changed dramatically. Secretary General said at the end of his speech that the situation seems to be really serious, and the economic crisis wouldn't develop into security crisis. So now we are obliged to look for a new approach, to be smart and more courageous as well. And I'm very happy that now Ministry of Defense is preparing a strategic defense review which creates a space for raising such, I would say, new and courageous ideas. Look, under the Slovak presidency in the Visegrad 4, during the last 11 months, we raised many interesting issues like energy security issue. We signed a special agreement between Slovakia and Hungary and many other activities. So if we are able, if we are courageous enough to cooperate on the field of energy security, why we shouldn't be able to go on and to cooperate also in defense? By the way, I am very happy that just last week, ministers of defense of Visegrad countries met in Levoča in the east of Slovakia, and they have decided to establish, to create a special battle group which should be fully operational as of 2016. A very good example of cooperation. So I believe that in cooperation, in the framework of our coalition partners, in cooperation with our NGOs, with cooperation with our allies in Visegrad, we are able to discover new approach and to cooperate more closely than in the past. So, defense review is very good space, very good opportunity, and I believe that in these new circumstances we can do more than 10 years ago.
Okay, thank you very much. And even I got here a little note that some of our technical problems will overcome. And I have questions from Prague. So let me, before it's gone again, let me pass the floor on to the Prague if they can hear us, and if they're able, let me pass the floor to you and have the first question from the audience. All right, you're on.
So I'm the student of Charles University, and I have a question about NATO-Russia relations. On 12th May, on your blog, you said that you are willing to develop a true strategic partnership between NATO and Russia to build Europe whole, free and peace. Have the NATO-Russia relations taken any steps towards such partnership or moved forward in communication after the Lisbon summit?
Thank you very much. We have a question on the NATO-Russia relationship. I mean, very topical question after President Medvedev's speech and your reply, Secretary General. But maybe let me pick also maybe one or two more questions and cluster those to both of you. So let me take one or two more questions from the audience here in the room and leave floor to you. Ladies and gentlemen. Floor is yours for the question here in the room. There is one courageous hand. Please, a young lady in the middle of the room.
Hello. Does it work?
Okay.
My name is Dana Vižinkarova. I'm a student at the Diplomatic Academy in Vienna. And I would like to ask about the current issue, which is Libya. I'm not asking about the operation because I can read this information at the website, but I would like more to ask about the intelligence work that the NATO is doing. I would like to know because in my view, the representatives of Libya here in Europe are a good source of intelligence information, and I'm sure you work with those who defected or resigned from the regime. And I'm curious if, how do you make sure who is on which side? And
who is good guy and who is wrong guy?
I'm just a student, so I'm really curious about this. And the second thing is, if it is in the scope of work of NATO to provide some framework for those representatives or ambassadors who would like to change the side, to leave the sinking ship. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. When we were kids, we played cowboys and Indians. We always quarreled the most. Which of those are good guys and bad guys? And that was the last question somewhere at the end of the audience. I saw the hand raised. Please go ahead. And I think we'll take those three and then come back to you after replies.
Thank you. Thank you. Follow-up question to Libya, we can say. Andrej Matišak, Devi Pravda, by the way. You, Mr. Secretary General, you have said that we have to act quickly to prevent crisis. So, in the case of Libya, my question is very easy. In the case of Libya, was it quick enough?
All right, here we got all easy questions to you.
Yeah, relevant questions, good questions. First on Russia. First of all, yes, I think our objective should be to develop a true strategic partnership with Russia. We do have our disagreements with Russia on Georgia, our open door policy and other issues, and we will continue to discuss with Russia on such issues, and we will not compromise on basic principles. However, in a number of areas we share security interests with Russia. On Afghanistan, counter-terrorism, counter-narcotics, counter-piracy, and also when it comes to the threat from missiles. And this is a reason why we have invited Russia to cooperate on missile defense. What we envision is an architecture with two independent missile defense systems, a Russian system and a NATO system, but two independent systems with a common purpose, to protect our populations. But of course, NATO will be responsible for the protection of people in NATO countries. We can't outsource that task, so to speak. So NATO will be responsible for the protection of people in NATO countries, Russia responsible for protection of the Russian people, but we can exchange data and by that make the whole system much more efficient. Yesterday, President Medvedev requested assurances that NATO's missile defense system will not be directed against Russia. I think the best assurance Russia could ever get is to engage with NATO in practical cooperation on missile defense, because such practical cooperation would clearly demonstrate to everybody that the system is not directed against Russia. It is a defense system, defense against a real missile threat. So we will now work hard to find solutions. It will be hard work, but I'm optimistic about finding a solution. On Libya, on which side, I can tell you in very clear terms that we support the Libyan people. We are in Libya to fully implement the UN Security Council resolution, which aims at protecting the civilian population against attacks. The fact is that the civilian population in Libya is subject to systematic and absolutely outrageous attacks from their own regime, from the Gaddafi regime. And this is a reason why we are targeting Gaddafi military capabilities that can be used to attack his own people, like tanks, armored vehicles, rocket launchers, ammunition storages, and also command and control centers. And we have actually succeeded in taking out a significant part of his war machine, and by that we have saved numerous lives. So we are clearly supporting the Libyan people. NATO is not in the business of providing safe havens for people who want to defect from the Libyan regime. That's for individual nations to do that. But I foresee that the combination of a strong military pressure and a reinforced political pressure on the regime and support for the opposition will eventually lead to the collapse of the Libyan regime. Time is up for Gaddafi and his regime. And finally, did we react fast enough? I think compared to how the international community has responded in the past, it was a quite quick response. Once the UN Security Council had adopted an historic resolution to protect the civilian population, an international coalition of the willing took action immediately. And it was in the very last minute, I admit, but they did. And by that, they also prevented a bloodshed in Libya. And soon after, NATO took over, and we spent just about 1 week to take that decision. In the 90s, when NATO took action in the Balkans, NATO spent months and months to take that decision. This time we reacted in about a week. So I think we reacted quite fast.
Thank you very much. I think we have still time for one or two questions. Here we have the question here front. Maybe not all, but please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Tomáš Pavelko. I'm from the Slovak Atlantic Commission. I don't have my own question. I have a question from Facebook. With the lessons learned from the Afghan mission, will the future operations of this kind be carried out differently from the very beginning? And if so, in what way? Maybe in other words, what do we know today that we did not know maybe 10 years ago, and how did the Afghan mission contribute to our knowledge and experience? Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Let me jump to the other side. There was here a hand. Please go ahead.
Mr. Secretary General, let me introduce myself. I am Private Jaroslav Babik from Slovak Armed Force Academy. And as we know, Slovak Republic has been a member of NATO since 2004. And I would like to ask you, what do you think about acting of Slovak Republic in NATO structure in this short time period? Do you think that Slovak Republic, our country, is reliable, credible member of NATO? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And let me just take the last question because I think, okay, two last questions. Okay.
Sir, Private Cadet Mačor from Academy of Armed Forces in Slovak Republic. I want to ask you, don't you think that wars against terrorism have or bring us more victims like benefits? Thank you.
All right, Simonka, the last question goes to this charming young lady of Slovak Atlantic Commission.
Thank you, Simona Kordosova, Slovak Atlantic Commission. Sir, I would like to go back to the missile defense system. While the US contribution to the system in the form of the European phase adaptive approach is pretty straightforward, there has been a lot of discussion about the European contribution. So I would like to ask you what is expected to be the European share of the system, and more importantly, if you see Europeans committed enough to this project. And what will happen if the budgetary austerity will prevent Europeans from funding its share to the project? Thank you.
All right, Mr. Secretary General.
Thank you very much. First, on Afghanistan, lessons learned. I think we have a lot of lessons learned, but I would highlight two. Firstly, seen retrospectively, we should have established a NATO training mission in Afghanistan at an earlier stage. Actually, it was not until 2009 that we really started a training mission. And it relates to what I also touched upon in my speech, that a lesson learned is that it's much better to train and educate local security forces so that they can do the fighting, instead of sending in a big number of international troops. Well, don't make any mistake, it is absolutely necessary to have a big number of international troops deployed to Afghanistan, and actually we increased the number of international troops by the end of 2009. You will recall that we increased the number by almost 40,000. So it's necessary, but it would make sense to train local security forces to take over the responsibility, and that's actually what we're doing right now. We have set the goal to train and educate around 300,000 Afghan soldiers and police by the end of this year, and already now we have more than 280,000. But we started too late. So that's one of the lessons learned. In the future, start training missions at an earlier stage. Second lesson learned, we have to reinforce the interaction between our military efforts and civilian efforts, realizing that there is no military solution solely to such conflicts. And this is also a reason why we have decided within NATO to establish a small unit, a civilian unit, that can be used to improve our interface with civilian organizations like the United Nations, the Asian Development Bank, the World Bank, and also the European Union. This is the second lesson learned, the comprehensive approach. Let military operations go hand in hand with reinforced civilian reconstruction efforts. Next question about Slovakia's contribution to NATO. We appreciate very much the Slovak contribution, notably contribution to our operation in Afghanistan, and I acknowledge that Slovakia has stayed committed despite all economic challenges. I also appreciate that Slovakia participates in a number of multinational programs within NATO. And by that, Slovakia serves as a good example of what I stressed today, the need for multinational cooperation. And politically, Slovakia has contributed in a very valuable way also to the preparation of our new strategic concepts, political support for our mission in Libya, and so on. So I would say we consider Slovakia a staunch ally and appreciate very much the cooperation with the Slovak government and Slovak military. Next question. If I understand you correctly, you indicate that it might be that the fight against terrorism has actually increased the risk of terrorism. Sometimes I meet that argument. I would not agree. Let's use Afghanistan as an example. Of course, the fact that we are in Afghanistan can be used or misused by terrorist groups as a bad excuse to conduct terror operations in some of our countries, of course. But they can use any excuse, and they do. Let me remind you that we were not in Afghanistan when terrorists attacked the United States, 9/11. We have seen terrorist attacks all over, and they always find bad excuses to conduct their horrible terrorist actions. So we are in Afghanistan to prevent the country from once again becoming a safe haven for terrorists that could use the country as a launching pad for their attacks against Europe and North America. It's a mistake to believe that we can stay safe if we shy away from taking action against the terrorists. And I appreciate very much that the successful operation against Osama bin Laden has been a major blow to international terrorism. I do believe it also sends a very strong signal to the Taliban in Afghanistan, a strong signal that extremism has no future. And I think that is the clear message that should be sent from all democracies in the world. Extremism has no future, and we are prepared to address it wherever we meet it. Finally, on missile defense, what is the European share? Obviously, the major contribution will be the American input. The Americans have offered that their existing missile defense system will be an input to an overall NATO-based missile defense system. The European share, the European contribution, will be existing missile defense capabilities in Europe. Actually, some European allies do have missile defense to protect deployed troops, so-called theater missile defense. But by connecting existing theater missile defense systems in Europe and the US missile defense system, we are able to protect not only deployed troops, but the whole population. And I have to say, it's a good deal for the Europeans. And based on the discussions we had in Lisbon, I am convinced that European allies will remain committed to this NATO-based system and also be prepared to invest the necessary resources in making this system effective.
Thank you very much. Small compliment to the end. I want to thank you, first of all, on behalf of all the group here on the web and in the other rooms, for talking to us and outlining the vision. It helps also in another way here in Slovakia. We are a small nation, 5 million, always being kind of caught in our own nightmares that how insignificant we are and nothing depends on us and we cannot change anything because it's just 5 million of us here in the middle of Europe. You set the example that being brave, courageous, having wisdom and vision, you can lead the larger lines and you do not come out of any country which is larger than ours. So thank you very much for setting the right example for this small nation that with the courage, wisdom, dedication and commitment, you can achieve a lot. Thank you very much for coming and talking to us. Mr. Minister, thank you very much for kind introduction.